And good evening, I'm Joe Spina.
And I'm Paul Crowley.
And this is Frankly Speaking.
Frankly Speaking, that's right, yeah.
Paul, you know, I have to tell you, I was pleasantly surprised by the response that we got on Facebook and Twitter, and a few people that walked up to me since our inaugural show.
Yeah, I got a lot of people commenting to me as well. It's nice to be back on the air. I think as much as we're enjoying it, there are people out in the community enjoying it as well. So if you see the show, you like it, make sure you tell us that on Facebook. Like us, send us comments. We'd love to hear what you have to say.
Is there a particular website they go to, or how do they write it?
It'll be flashing. If it's not on the screen right now, it will be flashing shortly. Please check it out, and hopefully we'll try to respond to your comments. In fact, didn't we have a comment that we wanted to respond to?
We do, but first I want to let them know that we have a little bit of a theme here. Truth is our mission, reality our realm, said as we see it, and frankly as well. You like that, Paul?
I do.
Okay,
You're
so that's
a poet.
First of all, let's go to that segment, and folks, let me just tell you, Paul and I do not have the privilege of being able to see a screen like we did at the other studio, but shortly we'll get there, and shortly we're going to be live call-in, which we fundamentally
that's
prefer,
really the ultimate
interactive.
goal for sure. Yeah.
But we're going to do the best we can. We're going to welcome you to Lynn, and you know, we have a great producer, and we have a great technician, and Dave Riley and Pedro Diaz. And I want to commend them for what they do for us. They put some great graphics up, and you know, entering the city of Lynn and all that stuff. Back in the last census, which was 2010, every 10 years you have another census. Lynn was slightly over 90,000 people. Now, the US of A, back in 2010, we're not talking about now, had 310 million roughly. China had 1.3 billion.
Right.
Now you say, wow. But here's the trick. This is the trick of statistics and how you have to do analysis. Let's talk about density. What's density, Paul? Do you remember?
Yeah, it's, the technical term I wouldn't be able to tell you, but I can tell you that the inner cities are much more dense than the rural areas.
Yeah,
how's that?
it's people per square mile.
Okay.
So if you're at Foxborough at a football game, that density is phenomenal.
Right.
Well, the city of Lynn's density, well, let me hold that off. The United States density is 87.4. And when I was a young man, it was probably around 50. So you can see that we're having added. China, with 1.3 billion, is 146, or 142, I'm sorry, right? City of Lynn, 8,076.
That's our density?
That's our density. Now, is that
what
phenomenal?
What an amazing stat.
Huh?
So, per square
mile,
yeah. There's 8,000 people per square mile in Lynn, and in China there's 150
per square mile density.
Yeah, but when you start, what about when you start saying like urban settings in China, like
well, it's a
Lynn?
different issue. We're looking at China in the aggregate. That's what I'm talking about.
Right, but China in the aggregate
of course,
versus
if you
Lynn
turn
in the
around
aggregate,
and look at Shanghai,
it's probably
that would make
10,000.
Lynn's density look like nothing.
Right.
So the point being, and the point we're trying to make out there, is this is the way they play with statistics. This is the way they take truths and twist and bend them to make an outcome
to suit their narrative.
Exactly.
Right.
Donald Trump, you stiff, you didn't give money, you know, that type of stuff. Truth of the matter is, he got 5.6 million out there.
Yeah.
So why would you scream and yell about it? You know, because they don't want to tell you that there's a delay factor, that you have to vet organizations, and there's paperwork that you have to do, which will lead us into farmer
well, let me just say that while I agree with everything that you're saying, Donald Trump cannot continue to just say, I'm not telling you anything. He is going to turn himself into the second coming of Barack Obama, where nobody's going to trust him because he's not going to be clear. If he is clear with the media, and the media is fair with him, I think it'll be fine. But it takes two to tango. The media need to be fair with him, and he needs to be fair in return. Don't you think?
Well, that's an equation of mutual balance.
Yep.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that a little later. Anyways, Lynn also, and I want to get into this, folks, because we have a marvelous city here, Paul. I've been looking at it. It looks a lot better than it has in years. Would you agree to that?
Yes,
and
absolutely.
they do some awfully fine work with we're a city of immigrants. We do a marvelous job of bringing immigrants in, welcoming them, getting them to acclimate to a new culture, and do wonderful things.
And you know, the school system, and you probably know this as well as anybody, that the student population in the Lynn school system speaks about 50 different languages, don't they?
You're the best. 49 languages are spoken in the city of Lynn. Yeah?
49 different
49
languages.
different languages.
And you think about the challenge that creates for an education system, trying to get them to learn English and so forth.
But I want to get to something that really, really folks out there ought to know. In 1950, that's post-World War II, obviously, right?
Yep.
The United Nations had been established, I believe in 48, I'm not sure, but they were quickly, and they have a commission, which they call Commission of Refugees, the United Nations. And they, at that point in time, designated the city of Lynn as a refugee city.
And did we ask for that designation?
No.
Did we endorse that designation?
No.
Did we embrace that designation? Actually, I think
The
it's
state and the
rhetorical.
federal government, let's go to the federal
The
government.
state and the federals don't have anything to do with it either, right?
No. In other words, the United Nations outranked our sovereignty as a nation by telling us what they were going to do in a nation to which they had no
So that
sovereignty.
means that a body that has nothing to do with the United States, has nothing to do with Massachusetts, has nothing to do with the city of Lynn, has told us that we will be designated a refugee destination, and as a result, we need to do what?
Well, our State Department actually hires contractors to place those refugees that the United Nations designates are coming to Lynn. How do you like that one?
So who pays them? They're paid by the United Nations?
No, by the taxpayers of the United States.
So
They pay
the
private contractors.
The federal government pays private contractors money to make sure that those refugees end up in Lynn.
And that they have all their services taken care of, because these contractors arrange for housing, or arrange for whatever food stamps or whatever benefits.
So how does the city of Lynn pay for all this stuff? I mean,
Did you look at your tax?
we're designated by the United
Nations.
Nations, and the effort is executed by the U.S. government. So
By the State Department.
what about, we're in City Hall, what about the mayor? Does she have any say in this?
No, she didn't.
How about the city council?
And as a matter of fact, the mayor pointed that out. See, everybody forgets, short memories. You and I were at an event in Boston when this was a hot issue. Unaccompanied minors, remember that? It was
Yep.
all over the news, national. Judy was on our mayor was on national news and the rest of it, on this issue. But it's soon forgotten.
Yep.
But the truth of the matter is it impacted the school system. All Judy was saying, look, we'd be more than happy to accommodate, but you got to spread it a little bit. That's number one. And number two, how about the dollars to follow?
Right.
Okay?
And it doesn't really follow, right?
Okay. And that's legitimate.
Yep.
Now, here is the second part of the equation. Of the refugees that are sent to Massachusetts, right? 90% of them go to exactly 4 cities.
In Massachusetts.
That's it. So 90% of all refugees
Obviously,
that come to
So
Massachusetts.
Lynn's one of them. What are the others?
Lawrence, does that surprise you? No, I'm
No.
sorry, not
Lowell.
Lawrence. Lowell,
Right.
Worcester, and Springfield.
Right. So it's 4 of the top 6 cities in the state, right?
Impacted, right.
Right. So the 2 other cities that are as big.
But
would
Judy
be-
pointed out that of that, Lynn is disproportioned.
even
share is
even
even-
amongst the 4.
Right, right. So what happens is, for example, I believe, and I have to pull out from our old shows. We did this on the show, and it was a very active show, by the way. I think that, let's pick a number. Say there were 500 refugees Lynn's allocation might have been 400 of the 500,
Right.
and the other 3 only got, and that, what we have to understand. Now you say, how's it paid for? Did you look at I just paid $1,238.47 in the month of May, right? Didn't I?
See, but that's the part that just doesn't comport with me, because when you think about, you use the word sovereignty. I mean,
Right.
the mayor and the city council represent the taxpayers of this city, and they're supposed to do by the city, but they're not in they don't have any power over the flow of refugees into the city. They can't say, for everyone you send, you need to write us a check for $5,000 so we can get things started or anything like that. In fact, the taxpayers have to absorb whatever comes in. And with the unlimited resources that are out there, you have to wonder, isn't that a recipe for failure? Isn't that like just setting us up to fail?
Oh, yeah.
If you're giving us more people in need and not enough money to manage that,
Well, we're going to be talking in the next segment about an individual who walked the earth in the 14th century.
And walking the earth in the 14th century would have meant like walking around Mesopotamia, right?
No. This guy was from Tunisia.
Yeah.
And we're going to get to him. And
But he didn't come to go to China, or he didn't go to the United States.
Oh, but
Walking the earth back then was a little different than it is today.
except for this, he's a giant thinker, and he's the father of economics, and he's the father of sociology, and he's the father of psychology, and he wrote a thesis called The Economic Theory of Ibn Khaldun, that's his name, an Arab.
I thought,
Arab.
Ibn Calhoun, I thought that would have been Irish.
Well, we're going to get to that in a second. And his book was called The Macadema. How do you like that, folks, huh? Spent a little Arabic. It's The Rise and Fall of Nations. And his proscriptions back then are so accurate, it is incredible. We'll get into that. In view of Lynn and the way it's going, we had a response from one of our, Divine Thinker, I believe was the name of the individual, from Lynn, and doing noble work, by the way, as an interfaith minister, and has had some thoughts. She's also a youth worker, and said, I don't support this usual casual, irresponsible conversation. I guess what you and I are doing is irresponsible.
Can I just say that that sounds to me like I'm not allowed to express my opinion. Is that?
Probably.
And then if you read further, I'm not allowed to express my point of view because I'm a baby boomer and that I'm a white man.
Well, you appear to be white. I'm going to make it official. I am white, and so isn't he. But as to the assumption of a baby boomer, Paul, you're too young to be a baby boomer.
No, that's not true. I am a baby boomer.
Are you really?
Yes.
I'm too old to be one.
64 is the end. I was born in 59.
Really? Well, baby boomer made whole. I don't know what that means. Is something bad about baby boomers?
How
old are you now?
56.
That qualifies you as a baby boomer? I don't know if my children are baby boomers now. One of my oldest ones.
64. They had to be born in 64.
No. 64?
Yeah.
So if my daughter was born in 65.
Yeah, so it's 45 to 64 is that
So
generation.
she didn't make the cut. Anyway, you have institutional power apparently and control, which is another vicious PC. I think vicious PC is what they did to Milo out there in the wherever, and they're screaming and yelling. Milo happens to be a conservative gay person.
Right.
And they are killing him.
Right, because he's both.
Because he's gay and he's conservative,
Right.
which they find to be an
Right.
oxymoron.
In other words, you can't have conservative thought if you're gay.
Which happens to be on the show we did last week when we mentioned diversity.
Right.
And
Diversity
every
of
category except thought
Right.
can have diversity of thought.
And that's what I'm troubled by this. I mean, I appreciate her opinion. I refute her statements because I don't think for a second that I have some kind of institutional power and control over others.
Apparently you do. You have institutional power.
I am stating my opinion, and if anybody wants to, object or counter my opinion
We're
or
seekers of
debate
truth,
it,
Paul.
I'm happy to do that.
It would be worth, and this I agree totally, it would be worth everybody's time to study the root causes of communities that are actually thriving. On that note, I say you're absolutely correct. So I asked simply, what about Detroit?
It's not thriving.
Why?
My opinion, it's not thriving because for the past 50 years it's been run by Democrats.
So it got politically correct. It became intolerant in the name of tolerance. It had terrible economic policies,
Yep.
and it went bankrupt.
Right, and now they're outraged that there's no water and that all these problems
So
exist.
where does empathy, creativity, and collaboration, where does that guarantee thriving?
Well, that's just it. I think some people think that if you do the right, if you empathize with somebody and you say, I want to make sure the best thing happens for you, and I do the wrong thing for you, that it doesn't matter what happens. All that matters is that I cared enough to want to do something.
How about work ethic? How about civic pride? How about collaboration in the sense, and that's true, I like creativity.
How about leadership on the part of
Now we're talking. So, Ibn Khaldun, who was born in Tunisia, who...
That sounds like an Irish name to me.
Ibn Khaldun?
Ibn Khaldun.
Ibn Khaldun, yeah. A man and a half.
He wasn't Irish.
Let me say a couple of things that he said back then, okay? Understand that Adam Smith,
The father of American economics, right?
pretty much of
Yeah.
supply and demand, copied him. And
Got
gave
most-
credit. And
got
gave,
most of his ideas from him.
and gave credit, by the way.
Yeah.
Who's that fellow that we talk about now that our government's predicated on? Keyes? Yeah. He also pirated, but he misunderstood. Karl Marx didn't make it. Karl Marx, folks, and Ricardo, those are the two socialist communists, right?
Right.
They completely missed the boat. And as
Well,
far
that's because they were so busy trying to create utopia that they ignored all the facts.
But here's what they misunderstood. Ibn Khaldun pointed out that excess surplus, economic surplus, that's wealth, can only come about through entrepreneurship. And that, as he wrote, he said he was opposed, for example, to taxation and tariffs that discourage trade and production. Does that sound familiar? Huh?
Donald Trump.
Well, he wants to fool around with tariffs, and they don't like, Ibn Khaldun says it's a bad idea. So on that note, he would probably be, Donald Trump doesn't stack up well on that one, right? But he also opposed involvement in trade and production activities. He thought bureaucrats, he didn't want them to get involved at all, government,
Right.
because the state bureaucrats, they don't understand commercial activities.
That's why.
And they don't have the same motivation of the businessmen.
That's why NAFTA's no good. That's why TPP is no good. That's why
Exactly.
all of these trade deals are no
And
good.
this is where Trump is correct.
Yep.
And he said he predicted the relative decline of economic surplus, that means wealth, and decline of countries in which state involvement in trade and production exists,
Right.
which is exactly the opposite of Karl Marx and Bernie Sanders.
Right, especially in today's politics, because most politicians are career politicians. So they never, ever understand the importance of small business and entrepreneurship. They just don't get it. They don't understand the sweat that you go through trying to make sure that you have enough money for payroll, borrowing money to meet payroll so that you can try to keep things alive, and the threat that will come about if in fact you can't make your payroll. You have to lay people off and go out of business and fail.
Let's run down some of these prescriptions. Folks, if you take out a pad of paper, we're going to get a little education here. Let's run down, Pedro, we're going to be going over to the rise of nations. For the rise of nations, in effect, that means for a prosperous society. And this is generated, and thank you, Divine Thinker, because this is thinking. He says 12 things that must exist for a country, an economy, society to thrive, right? Number one, right on top, what is it?
Private property rights.
So government ownership's a bad thing. All that land out west is owned by who?
Government.
The federal government. So you can't tap into it, can you?
Right.
Don't.
So let me ask you, because I have this debate with my brother, who is a staunch Bernie Sanders supporter, and he says that we need the social supports that come with Bernie's idea of government. And I say, but he also brings socialism, and if you fully understand what socialism is, you might have second thoughts about it. Because one of the primary tenets of socialism is that the government owns the means to
No
production.
private property.
Right, no private
Yeah,
property.
it's common ownership.
Right.
Ask him how Venezuela's doing lately.
Last time
Does
I heard
that occur to him?
Yeah.
That happens to be a socialist.
7 hours waiting in line to get a bag of groceries.
Ask him about the Soviet Union, why it no longer exists. Why has all of Eastern Europe gone the opposite way? Eastern Europe is adopting Ibn Khaldun's prescriptions.
Right.
All right? The second thing, and this is very important, folks, is the rule of law. Now, by the rule of law, they mean a reliable judicial system and for the establishment of justices. Now, that is probably the single most critical issue in this election cycle, is the vacancies on the Supreme Court that are about to happen.
Right.
If you have political agendas on that Supreme Court, if they're trying to legislate rather than interpret, they're supposed to be referees.
Right.
They're not supposed to make the rules as they go along.
Which is what they've been doing.
Exactly.
And if the political bent comes from the left, it means they're going to just basically eliminate the Bill of Rights and
when one commits a crime
Constitution.
or breaks the law at any level, justice says that they must be punished.
Right.
So we have a lot of politicians who've done some dastardly things that have enriched themselves and are having a wonderful life and no accountability. And we have some people who, quote unquote, in comparison, have done far less, who have been far more severely punished.
Give me an example of somebody who...
What the meaning of is.
What is the meaning of is?
I don't know, you have to talk to our former president, because he's the
Right.
one who brought that one up.
Well, I think what you were referring to is like General Petraeus didn't do very much, and his career was ruined. Did very far less than what Hillary Clinton has been accused of.
I'm going to say Richard Nixon did far less.
Yeah.
I'm going to go that bad. And I'm not a fan of Richard Nixon, okay?
Right.
I'm going to say that there's been some awful things done by a lot of people who are getting away with it, and now it gives permission to other people not to follow the law.
Right.
When Al Sharpton owes $600,000 in back taxes to the federal government, and he visits the White House 57, 67, how many times he does, I find that unconscionable.
Right. He should be nowhere near the president.
When I look at MSNBC,
Yeah.
and they have about 6 of their newscasters, all of them making pronouncements about capitalism and taxation, the rich should pay more, who are all on the hook to the state of New York and the federal government for not paying their taxes.
Is that right?
Okay?
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking. So when that happens, you have no justice. Therefore, what's going to happen to your nation? Will it rise?
No.
Okay. It's happened to Detroit. Security. You must secure peace, and you must secure your trade routes.
Right.
Well, I used to see this wonderful ad on TV about the Navy. It said we're a global force for good. And in fact, they were. Our Navy allowed commerce, got rid of the pirates, and the whole world benefited from our Navy, right? Our Navy has been shelled, as you well know. As we speak, there is a big, big daddy on the field building islands in the South China Sea to control trade routes. That's problematic.
Right. And we're not really doing anything about it because
Of course we're not.
Because Obama is feckless when it comes to
we
foreign
cut
policy.
we cut our Navy practically to nothing.
But you know what? Even if he had twice as many ships as the Chinese, he wouldn't deploy them.
We don't have a space program, Paul. You can't do anything unless you control space, which we once did. In fact, don't we contract the Soviets and the Chinese for our commercial enterprises?
I got to say this.
Go ahead.
In the early 60s,
Uh-huh.
John F. Kennedy said, I'm going to put a man on the moon, right? In 2016, Barack Obama says, I'm going to put a man in the ladies' room.
You're awful. Folks, I kind of like that one. I'll ask you a simple question. John F. Kennedy, 1960, Democrat. Who would he vote for? Would he vote for Bernie, Hillary, or Trump?
Trump.
He would, wouldn't he?
He'd probably have the same kind of issues that I have with Trump, and he's got to, you know.
So you're telling me that the 1960s, Democratic Party of the 1960s, as represented by John F. Kennedy, does not exist any longer?
No. I was having this conversation with a friend of mine over the weekend, and just by way of example, the state of Massachusetts is predominantly Democrat, right? If you look at the legislature, forgetting about the governor for a moment, if you look at the legislature, there's like 6 senators out of 30 or 40, whatever it is, and then there's maybe 25 reps out of 160, right? Huge majority for both the House and the Senate. All Democrats. But as it turns out, there's a conservative wing of the Democrat Party in Massachusetts.
Yes.
And in fact, it's controlled
Of which Elizabeth Warren is not a member.
Right.
Who used to be
I'm
a
just talking
Republican,
about
by the way. In 1995, Elizabeth Warren was a Republican.
She's not much different than Donald Trump.
Well, she
in
flips
a lot
property.
right. She does whatever suits her at the time, and then just does whatever she wants later.
Well, Paul, you're being somewhat disingenuous because Donald Trump makes no excuses. He doesn't lie or hide from the fact. She does.
Right.
She's a
I mean,
pretender.
there's clearly a big difference. I mean, currently they have different philosophical views. I guess what I'm saying is that, a lot of the things that Elizabeth Warren gripes about Donald Trump, she should look right in the mirror on.
Yeah,
Not everything, but, something.
Yeah, she's sitting on 15 million.
Yeah.
She's not
Right.
struggling.
And she did it on the backs of people who lost their homes in foreclosure.
And she made a lot of money doing that.
Right. And she's the first one to say that he likes it when the real estate market declines.
We have an individual running for president of the United States who's sitting on conservatively $100 million, who in the last 2 years made $21 million yicky-yakking to Goldman Sachs.
Right.
Okay? Never worked a day in her life. Was the only person in the history of mankind and womankind that had $1,000 and turned it into $100,000 on the futures market.
And was just lucky.
Yeah, I'm talking about, John Sununu has a 200 IQ, he's mega, and Albert Einstein, and Leonardo da Vinci, and Sir Isaac Newton, and Ibn Khaldun himself, and Confucius, we're going to hit them all. They could all get together, and none of them could have ever done that trick.
Right. Well, that's how
virtually
she made
impossible.
that. She turned $1,000 into $100,000 was because she read the Wall Street Journal, right?
Well, that person has a distinct possibility of being president of the United States. And that person said, even if convicted, 50% of the people say, keep running. I mean, that is what Ibn Khaldun is talking about.
71% of the Democrats
Will want her to will vote for her regardless.
Says if Hillary Clinton is indicted,
Yep.
that they will vote for her anyway.
Isn't that sad? Isn't that sad?
Right.
Richard Nixon had somebody he didn't know break into our office, and they got him, and they drummed him out.
Forced him to resign.
And he was a pretty good president, and I didn't like him, by the way, but he was a pretty good president. By the way, he was more of a big government. It certainly wasn't conservative. They misunderstand that. Next, Ibn Khaldun said, low taxation in order to increase production and revenues.
That's such a no-brainer too. I mean, you don't have to be Ibn Khaldun to see that if you give people more money to invest, that they'll do
How
more.
come that message never got to the Democratic Party?
Because the Democratic Party is only interested in their own agenda, growing their own power and control.
Well, isn't it self-evident that if you increase taxes, you actually decrease revenues and you create unemployment? Hasn't that ever occurred to anybody? Because it narrows production. Ronald Reagan cut taxes and they end up with more revenue. By cutting taxes,
Right.
you end up with more.
I would argue that
revenue is the flow of cash coming in,
And
right?
I won't say this about all Democrats, but I will argue that a lot of the Democrats that are in control believe that they are the only ones that know what to do, and it's better if the electorate is kind of left in the dark, and it doesn't matter whether they succeed or not. In fact, you kind of like it that they don't succeed because
Number
that keeps
5.
them in power.
Number 5. This will surprise you folks. I happen to agree with it, by the way. Less bureaucracy, which we'd all agree with, and a much smaller, efficient army. That's fascinating.
And I love that. You know, I think probably the single biggest problem for conservatives is probably more like a neocon position, is that, you know, got to have the strong military. Because what they do is they just throw money at the military-industrial complex to say that they're strong military, instead of making sure that, like you said, it's a small and efficient army. Instead, what they're doing is, you know,
Now, I could give
wasting money.
Yeah. I could give credit to Barack Obama for streamlining if he made it lean and mean.
He didn't streamline it. He decapitated it.
That's a different issue.
Yeah.
And this is where I think Donald Trump, although it fits his MO, you know, the strength factor, I'm going to build the strongest military so no one will mess with us, that resonates. But the reality is you're probably, according to Ibn Khaldun and a lot of serious thinkers, speaking to the divine thinker, you know, about rethinking things, perhaps we are better off with a smaller military that's efficient and lean. So that's open for discussion.
So here, I have something that's always troubled me about the last Republican administration, the George W. Bush administration. Just want to throw it out there. So in 1989, I believe the wall came down. Basically, the collapse of Soviet Union, right? In the early 90s, when Clinton became the president, he talked about the peace dividend. Remember the peace dividend? Basically, they were able to shrink the size of the defense budget and benefit by reducing deficits and so forth. Then in 2000, when George W. Bush took over, and there was essentially no power that could really match the United States like happened before '89, that, you know, when the Soviet Union was kind of the Cold War kind of always. So we were the only superpower in 2000, and it wasn't long before the aggression of
Iraq, Afghanistan.
Right. We got aggressive and we did our thing. And I think that it's important that there's always two competing forces to kind of keep each other in check. And
That's an
maybe
interesting
China
point,
needs to be there now or whatever. And it's not that we want them to be able to level us. We want them to be able to keep us in check, because I know that's what will happen with business and government working together. They'll eventually try to move into another, you know, what's the next prairie to conquer or whatever, you know?
You know, it's a lot of discussion about this. As our shows progress, we can get into different shades of it. No government involvement, and I find this to be, and folks listen to this one, no government involvement in trade, production, and commercial affairs.
Which means no NAFTA, right?
It means no regulations.
Right.
Okay?
Well, that's what NAFTA is, right?
And NAFTA, or this new one they came up with, and he's saying that's not a good idea. And now Richard Nixon did this, and I lived under it, and he says no price fixing by government. Very bad.
Right. Oh,
So,
absolutely.
and government does get in the business of price fixing, as you well know. They're price fixing healthcare,
Right.
which means you got crappy healthcare. That's why the VA is what it is.
Right. There's, you know, in this business of one-payer systems that they want to go.
Terrible.
Yeah, it would absolutely fix the cost. In Medicaid and Medicare, the U.S. government tells the hospitals, the doctors, and all the other fee-for-service
And they're not
providers
going to pay for
how much
something.
they're going to pay.
And what they're going to pay for and what they're not going to pay for.
Right.
So they make a decision. Folks, I want to give you a simple explanation of what is wrong with Obamacare and socialism. Ready, Paul? All of us shampoo our hair. And I actually condition mine at times.
You do?
I do.
You know, it looks like you do.
It does, doesn't it?
Hey, by the way, what do you think of Joe's tie? Have you noticed that it matches his socks? Well, not really, but
Is
anyway,
that enough of that?
I've had enough of that.
That's why the woman's right about this casual nonsense stock that we do. So if you go into a CVS or a Walgreens or a Walmart or a mass merchandiser, They have rows and rows of every kind of shampoo you can envision or imagine. Different quality, different fragrances. I like Pantene myself.
Different price.
At a very reasonable price. Okay? That's called capitalism. And the same with conditioners. Now, I want you to envision a situation when you walk in, there's exactly one shampoo and one conditioner. That's it.
First of all, the price will be lousy and the quality will be even worse.
Oh, the price will be way up and the quality will be terrible.
Right.
That's Obamacare, that's socialism. So, what they don't like about capitalism is that somebody makes a lousy soap and makes a lousy shampoo and conditioner, and what happens? They go out of business, as they should. So there are.
No, what they don't like about it is that
there's losers.
Well, there are winners.
There's winners and losers.
But the government doesn't have a problem with that because they like picking the winners and losers. But
no, they're trying to.
They
make
don't like
losers.
they don't like the fact that the capitalist makes out very well if he does a good job.
The capitalist can only do well. It's a coordinated effort. Ibn Khaldun mentioned that, and this is where Marx is wrong. Marx says all value comes from the worker, and anything of anybody else who makes a profit from the worker is exploitive. He says no. Both value. It's a combination of the two.
Right.
Without the entrepreneur, there's no value in labor. Labor needs the entrepreneur needs labor.
Right.
They both create profit. They're both motivated by profit. If a corporation is making a lot of money, it will reward its workers. Otherwise, it's not going to have its workers. That's simple.
Right.
That's understood. And this is where everybody misses the boat. It's a coordinated. He was not opposed to high wages. He said those high wages come about by this economic surplus that exists when government's out of the business of sucking it all up.
Right.
The king or the monarch wants to build a great palace and this is where Donald Trump is correct, by monetary policy, by devaluating money, which is the greatest crime they can do to the middle class. This is where Donald Trump is exactly right about China and Japan that devalued the dollar.
Well, and what he says, and I think you have to read between the lines on this, is but when Donald Trump says China is cheating by devaluing its currency, it's even more a problem when you think about it from the point of view that the United States is allowing it, therefore they're as much a part of the problem.
Of course it.
And by the way, they just don't ignore it because they don't throw their hands up and say there's nothing we can do about it, let's let it happen. They prefer it this way. The US government I'm talking about.
Well, you need a stable monetary policy. Now, I was looking, history is a fascination of mine. When I was a young person in education, starting salary was about $5,000 a year. Now, on $5,000, I could buy a house, I could have a decent car, I could feed my family, go on vacation, and put my little money in the bank.
Right.
At $5,000 a year. All right, so now we'll say it's $50,000. That's a factor of 10. But you know what? I could buy a Volkswagen brand new for $800 back then. Tell me I can buy a Volkswagen today for $8,000.
No, you can't. That's right.
No. Tell me that taxes haven't intervened significantly. I had 3 children while I was a college student with no health insurance and paid for all 3 out of my pocket. Dr. DeClerico, $150. Union Hospital, $250. $400. I had kids.
My mother said I cost $300.
That's it.
Yep.
Don't laugh about that. That's it.
It's pretty funny when you think about
it. Today, my own children, had to pay with insurance 10 or 15 grand to have kids.
Right.
Now,
no, 10 or 15 just to live.
Yeah. So these folks out here better understand that they got to get involved in the economics. If you think this show is frivolous, shame on you, because we're trying to bring to you the realities of economics and things you have to think about to save your children and grandchildren, because if we keep going in the direction we're going, it's over. In fact, Alan Greenspan, of all people, came out recently and said it's not just a phenomenon of the United States, it's a phenomenon of the industrialized countries of the world, that they're aging, that they're all, and they gave the store away, all types of benefits and the rest of it, which I'm receiving, by the way, pensions and health care. Who's going to pay for it?
Right.
Everybody's getting older, and nobody can, and you can't cut back on them to be, and you have to. And this is what he's saying. He's saying, unless they do drastic measures with entitlements in this country, forget it. Or for that matter, in the world, we're going to become a disaster. We'll end up being back in the cave, going like this, and rubbing sticks together. And that, I don't mean to be like this, but it only makes sense.
And it's a question of when, but...
but if it happens, it's not going to affect me that much because, I've had my time on Earth. But, I mean, it's a sad commentary for my grandkids, isn't it?
Yep.
So where is the justice? The changing world's a good thing. I mean, I went to St. Anselm's. I'm sitting there. My granddaughter gets a degree. I'm happy about that. But then I look, and I said, 65% of the students that graduated, Paul, were males.
Right.
I mean, females. 35% males. It was an overload.
That's
and that's
isn't
a
it?
tribute. Yeah, that's a tribute to women who work hard for it. But what happens is, as we move into this other category, known as, snarky quips, are males becoming superfluous?
I don't think I am.
Oh, really?
Really? Am I?
Wow.
Well, what define
Not
the term
necessary.
not necessary?
Yeah.
Well,
We got robots. We don't have to fight war anymore with brawn, right? These guys are not getting educated and going to college. There was a comparative made between Cairo, Egypt, and Cairo, Illinois, about the same problem of a whole bunch of young men who have college degrees or are educated, can't get a job, got nothing to do, and no one wants to marry them. They have nothing to offer. So consequently, they become superfluous, which is bad for society because, it's like wolf packs. Now,
that's an interesting
I
point.
mentioned this to my daughter and my two granddaughters while they were treating me to brunch the other day about the status of men, because I thought about the 65-70% split between male and female graduating from college. And I said, I'm wondering if men are superfluous or not. I mean, you only need one rooster. Yeah. And my daughter said, no, we need him to take out the garbage. So I thought that was kind of cute. Paul, globalization, which is all part of the problem. This is not mine, but a thought that someone said to me, and it stuck with me, mentioned that globalization to him was, busing on steroids.
So what
Forced
do you mean
busing.
by forced busing? So that means that you force all the different
Is it migration?
ethnicities.
Is it migration? Busing? Isn't that migration? People from one area going to another area? In other words,
It's busing when they come across the Rio Grande. It's forced busing when we say we don't want them anymore, and they say you're getting them anyway.
in any way you want to look at it, the point of the matter is there's a great movement taking place worldwide now, right?
Yeah.
So globalization is trying to homogenize, to extinguish borders.
And in many respects, that's why they allowed what was originally called the Arab Spring, which is more like an Arab fiasco, is they wanted to create instability in North Africa to create this migration.
That's true, in Libya. That's a good point, Now, why is it that the EU, otherwise known as the European Union, why are they going to have a vote as to whether they're going to stay or not? Britain wants to say bye-bye, right?
The Brexit, yeah.
Yeah. A lot of folks don't want to be there. They're sick and tired of subsidizing Portugal and Greece, right? They say, what the heck are we doing?
And they're dealing with the immigration issue as well.
Well, Merkel is in big trouble in Germany now. You know what's an interesting aside that I mentioned that someone said about that problem? They said, German men have forgotten how to fight, which goes back to that superfluous male. It's an interesting concept, isn't it? I mean, if you don't like them coming in, you put up the walls, you barricade them, right? And that's the end of that. Now, I don't want to sound harsh, people. I'm not advocating, but...
Hey, I know we got into globalization, but there was something about Lynn I wanted to talk about. You mind if we jump back to it?
Yeah,
I was,
that.
If you go when you're coming down the Lynn Shore Drive from Swampscott, it says entering Lynn.
Yeah.
And it says established in 1629.
Yeah.
That means that we're only 13 years away from our 400th anniversary.
Wow.
And I think that's, I mean, 13 years may seem like a long time, and I mean, I'll be close to 70 years of age, then you'll probably be,
Don't talk
you'll be
about it.
90.
Nice try. But that's a great hallmark.
It is, and
400 years?
and 13 years isn't very
Has
long.
anybody thought about doing something about this?
I have. That's why I'm
You
bringing
have?
it up. I mean, I don't know what to do, but
What are you planning?
I'm not planning on anything other than celebrating it. We should probably, Lynn should embrace 2029 the way that the world embraced the millennium.
I'm going to ask Pedro about this. You know what?
Pedro knows all about this stuff,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, he'll be around for the 400th year for sure.
Yeah.
And he's the future, as is Dave Riley. So they got to get on the horse, use Lynn TV to predate, and they got 13 years to work on this big event. I know they can handle it. Right? But that is fascinating, right? 400 years.
That's we're older than most communities in this country, right? It all started here, King's Lynn, right?
And I want to give you something.
Yep.
The guy that we were talking about was 300 years older than that. So Ibn Khaldun goes back
To 1400, right?
700 years. And he made all these pronouncements and prescriptions about the rise and fall of nations back then, long before all of these folks started talking about it. So the point I want to try to make to you folks out there, if you understand me, is that there is no exclusivity. Caucasians, white men, otherwise known, they don't have monopoly on anything. Ibn Khaldun was hardly, Caucasian or white. Confucius, if I'm not mistaken, he was Chinese.
Yeah.
Brilliant man, right? Philosopher. And I could go on and on and on. It goes from everywhere. We can't get caught in these traps of this privilege and power privilege. Civilization is the answer, and civilization is the cumulative effect of a whole bunch of different people interacting with one another.
That's right.
And there are absolute standards of civilization that cannot be transgressed, which is paint your picket fence every once in a while, cut the lawn, and be polite to people. Take care of your children and love them. That's called civilization. That's what it's about. The rest of it's just noise.
Oh, I know, that's right. And anybody who says that, and I hate to keep quoting back to this this young lady, but the whole notion that somehow we have, I'm going to just quote here.
I'm looking at my notes here, huh? The notion that
you appear to be white men who are of the boomer generation. As such, you have institutional power and control. Another vicious PC thing. And I'm really not sure I completely understand that, other than to say that the only reason I have institutional power and control is because I'm a white man. First of all, I don't think I have institutional power and control. I try to do the right thing every day of my life. Whether
even if you were a female and from Mars.
Yeah, I would do this. I mean, I am who I am, and I try to do the right thing every day.
We don't have too much time left, and I always like to test the brilliance of our audience. So our last test here has got to do with matching their skills. And the Secret Service?
Yeah.
Some of those guys are out of shape now. They used to be lean and mean.
They take care of the president and their families and all of the ex-presidents and their families.
I read a marvelous book about who they liked and who they didn't like. We'll get into that.
I read that too.
You did. We'll talk about that. Code names. They
all
call
have
it code names. So we got up there on
What's Clinton's girlfriend's name?
Huh?
The Energizer Bunny?
That's someone else. That's for girlfriends.
Clinton's girlfriend. Yeah.
I cannot mention that. That's you. You get in trouble, not me. Let you get sued.
But that's what they call her, right?
Yeah.
That was in the book.
It was in the book.
Yeah.
And she brought cookies for them, too.
That's right. She was nice to them.
Chocolate chip cookies at that. So they run from Lancer to Volunteer to Searchlight, Passkey, Deacon, Rawhide, Timberwolf, Eagle, Trailblazer, and Renegade. And that goes from 1960 to the present. Now, and not to make things easy for everybody, guess what? To an absolute order. For example, JFK, in fact, was Lancer.
And how appropriate. He convened over Lancelot, right?
Yeah, Lancelot, I like that. And Barack Obama is called renegade. So you can work them in between. They don't have to really take the tests. Let me trick you. Which one do you think is appropriately Ronald Reagan?
Rawhide, of course.
Bingo. Yeah, that's it. I thought Searchlight was kind of ironic
I mean, they could have called him B-movie too, right?
on that. So, speaking of the Secret Service, they didn't particularly like Gerald Ford. And Gerald Ford considered himself an athlete. You know, he was
He played football in college.
from Michigan, All-American. I think he went kind of on the pros. But he's also a skier. And he used to ski down the slopes and he'd drive the Secret Service crazy.
Because they couldn't keep up with him?
Yeah. So they hire a professional skier who skied down the hill backwards and gave the finger to Ford, and that was the Secret Service's way in the book of getting even with him.
Now, didn't Gerald Ford used to get insulted by the media for being clumsy?
He was not anything but.
No, I know, but did that happen?
Yes, he fell, and they called him clumsy and the rest. He was a heck of an athlete.
Right.
See, this is perception versus reality, which is what we're trying to do on this show.
Right.
Say, listen, let's talk about reality.
And the only reason they did that was because he was a Republican, and they didn't want the.
You know, they come up with all types of stuff. I mean, you know, Camelot, you know, say anything about Camelot. The guy's bringing in young honeys. You know, he's got Giancana's girlfriend flying into the White House before Bill Clinton was famous. You know, what about? You ever read about Johnson? He was a Bulgarian of the first order, right?
He used to like swimming with no clothes on, right?
In front of everybody.
In front of everybody, right?
So we can go back and forth. The gentleman who I like. Look, you may not like certain people politically, but they have character. And there's a number of them that did. And I don't want to go up and down that road. We got about a minute left, Paul. I want to say this. Thank you for making us, welcoming us back. Appreciate that.
It's good to be back.
And
in your
you're
living
supposed
room.
to tell them how to get in touch with us if they want to comment.
You'll see it across the bottom of the screen. Go to our Facebook site and leave your comments, like us, and you know that's our way of knowing who's participating and who's enjoying our show. Because we want to grow our audience and get more people participating, and hopefully it won't be long, and we'll have the ability to go live and have guests on, and we'll be able to do the call-in show again. That'll be a lot of fun.
And on that note, for all of us here at Lynn TV, Community Lynn TV, you have a pleasant evening.